My name is Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd. But we're not like them. We're part of a new species that isn't afraid to do things differently. I call us FOMO Sapiens. And this is the show where you'll meet people like us, phenomenal FOMO Sapiens, to learn how they find the courage and the ideas to live exceptional lives. FOMO. FOMO. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for people who don't just follow the crowd, but instead take their own path to success in business and in life. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, venture capitalist by day, author and podcaster by night, and of course, FOMO Sapiens 24/7. Now, last week was our season premiere, talking to Olympian Kara Goucher about her battle for freedom, along with the writer of her book, The Longest Race, Mary Pilon. Now, if you didn't listen to that episode, I'm going to encourage you to go do that right now because it really sets the stage for part two. I got in the middle of this interview and I hadn't planned on a double episode, but I was mesmerized by this conversation, and it really does hit on the themes of the season, crush it without getting crushed, but also on the power of FOMO and how one can fight back against that when it manipulates us to do things we don't want to do. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to jump right in. Not even a small ask this week. My small ask is just enjoy a break. So let's do it. Let's jump in right now with part two. FOMO. All right, everybody. We are back with Kara Goucher and Mary Pilon. As you recall, last week, we started telling the story. Kara started sharing her story of her career in elite distance running and her experience as part of the Nike Oregon project, which was like this sort of velvet rope, very high-end, very elite running program. And inside of that program, she suffered abuse by her coach, Alberto Salazar. So we talked about that. We're going to pick it up, and we talked with Mary, who co-wrote the book with Kara and has covered this story and also covered the story of Larry Nassar and USA Gymnastics. So we talked a lot about the psychology. We talked a lot about Kara's experience. But what I want to do this week is pick up where we left off. And, as I read the book, the thing that really stuck with me and where I kind of was invested emotionally in a lot of ways was that, it looks so good from the outside. And this happens all the time. Like the Instagram looks so good. And then but that behind the scenes, like nothing's that good, right? But this is the thing. You had kids all over the world, all over the country. You had people, runners, who look at you and they could not imagine, right, what you're dealing with. And you are having success. It's not like you're not succeeding, even though you're in this messed up place where you're being treated completely inappropriate. You're making the podiums at the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon. You're in the Olympics. So it's a crazy place to be. And I just want to start there. Talk about, please, that dichotomy and how it feels when on the outside, it's like you're killing it, but yet you're paying this huge price that nobody knows about.
Well, I think the Instagram comparison is spot on. But you have to remember, I still felt lucky to be there. Even though everyone's talking about my body, openly making jokes about me, I'm seeing stuff that's very uncomfortable. I'm like, hey, just what you said, I am succeeding. And this is I believe that that's what it took. To be successful in sport as a female, you just had to grin and bear some stuff that was yucky. That's just what it takes. That's just the environment that you're in. And so I was I still felt like I was lucky to be here, but a lot of the joy in the process, it wasn't there anymore. I was not loving it the way I did when I was in college or high school or when I first started there. It had really shifted to be a job. And yeah, I was still chasing my dreams, but it wasn't as joyful as it had once been. It was kind of I was just going through the motions and hoping I would do something big enough to make Alberto and the team happy instead of living in the moment and being present and, feeling the things that I was accomplishing, because everything I accomplished to the outside, people thought I was doing amazing, but to my team, everything was a disappointment. I had always let them down in some way, shape, or form. So it was just weird, right? I just felt like that's what you have to do to have success. You just have to put up with the lumps, and it is hard and it is uncomfortable. But yeah, nobody knew what was going on behind closed doors because I didn't even really realize at that point that it was like wildly inappropriate.
It occurs to me, I have a thesis, and I'd love your thoughts on it, Kara, because as I'm listening to you, like I keep thinking of the word resilient, but it's like a resiliency that's not serving you, unfortunately. It's serving you on the race. It's not serving you in inside of all the stuff that you're dealing with. But when you're a long distance runner, like one of the things that like people I know who are really good runners, like the one thing that they have that a lot of people don't is like their tolerance for pain is like really high. They just like, I don't even know how they do it, but they do it. And so like, I'm curious, have you thought about like, because you had built up this physical resilience and this tolerance for pain, this mental toughness, like did somehow that actually work against you and that you just sort of were able to like persevere where others would not?
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my father at a really young age. And I think very early on, I learned how to like push away pain, push away things that are going to make me uncomfortable or make other people uncomfortable. Right. So if I'd say, well, my dad died when I was little, and people would say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'd be like, you don't need to be sorry. You didn't have anything to do with it, instead of like feeling that they were truly empathetic. Right. So I think that I learned from a young age to put things aside. And then as an athlete, you have to do that. You have to embrace the pain. You have to just say, you know what, this is going to hurt for 2 hours today while I'm training. It's going to be uncomfortable. And I just have to accept it. And I can't think about it. I just have to accept it. And even when you're racing, like we were talking about the marathon, it's a 2.5 hour endeavor. At 30 minutes, you can't be thinking about, oh, I can't wait till I finish. I hope it goes like that. You have to be in the moment. And so I learned at a pretty young age to compartmentalize. And I do think that as an athlete, it did help me because I was able to put aside things that could potentially hurt my performance. But in the end, it didn't serve me as a human being because I never allowed myself to feel things or to really examine things. Everything was always put in a box and pushed aside. If it wasn't getting me to win a race, then I couldn't have it in my life.
As I think about this story, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but Mary, I want to go back to this. Like, so there is like one criminal here, which is Alberto. It's who did, really bad things, and individuals do bad things all the time. Companies, on the other hand, somehow we expect more companies, right? Nike. It's like when I think of Nike, Shoe Dog, everybody loves Shoe Dog, right? We all love Phil Knight. Everybody loves Shoe Dog. I don't know why. I didn't read Shoe Dog, but they love it. I'm wearing Nikes right now. Like when I think of Nike, I'm like, it makes me feel all the warm feelings, right? But Nike is an accomplice in this story. And I want to hear, Mary, from your perspective, because this is a business story too. Like, and it's just, and again, it's like mind blowing. Like, what did Nike do? How did they contribute to this situation?
Sure. So I did read Shoe Dog and I love it. I think J.R. Moehringer, who is the ghostwriter, that he's a genius, right?
Everybody loves Shoe Dog.
And I think because I kind of grew up in Nike's backyard, I mean, I was literally born a 5-minute walk from Hayward Field.
Wow.
Nike has a really complicated relationship with Eugene, right? And in my childhood, I watched the Oregon Ducks go from a crappy football team that my parents used to take me to because it was empty, like Autzen Stadium was where you let your kids run around, to a powerhouse. I mean, those facilities rival NFL facilities that I've been to. It's an institution, right? It's a big company. And I think their marketing and branding is brilliant, right? You can go anywhere in the world and see a swoosh. And the company, the irony to me of the story, and there's a lot of it, is it's named after the female goddess of victory. And yet, women are so underrepresented at the highest levels of that company. And Kara's story, there were big sequences that I thought were really important, like when she was pregnant and they suspended her pay, but were very happy to trot her around as this, feminist symbol of motherhood and athleticism. But when it came to literally paying her, literally valuing her, even as she was moving merchandise, they actively were punishing her. Allison Felix, other runners too, who are, doing things that they're blazing the trail. That's supposed to be the brand. And I think in terms of how Alberto understood that, something I've thought about a lot is that I've never interviewed Phil Knight, but I do think Oregon track in the 70s, kind of that running heyday, is his rosebud. I think that is the DNA of the company. That is how the company started. Steve Prefontaine, who I spent a lot of time reporting on his death and legacy. That era of running history, I think, is really important. And that is how Alberto was able to create, you follow the money, right? Like if we didn't have money, none of this story would be happening. Money was the resources, money was the glitz. And Alberto was a direct link because he was a huge star in his time. He was known for being this really tough, rugged runner. And that speaks to Phil Knight. As much as we love Air and as much as we love the Jordan story, running as like that's the rosebud here. And I think that if this was another sport, I don't know if this all would have gone down the same way. I think there is something about what Alberto was pitching to the company that really spoke to Nike and its ethos. And, it removed a lot of chains of power too. But this isn't unique to just Nike. I think sports in general has a really long way to go. Sports journalism, my industry, is 85% men. I don't understand that. I think that's crazy.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot of institutional headwind that makes these stories sadly not too surprising to me, because it's a big place, and their goal is to move merchandise. It's not a nonprofit. It's not to make you feel good. And I think that tension, which Kara's story I think very much lives in, is really interesting.
FOMO. Yeah, and the thing too is like as I was reading this is like, the sheer number of dollars that they're putting out to athletes, like it's not like they're giving millions and millions. You're still like amateur athletes, but when your job is to be fully focused on training, and this allows you to do that and live reasonably comfortably and not have to be, eating like ramen, which you can't do if you're a long distance runner because it's too much sodium. You can understand you have a scarcity mindset. Like, I got to keep this money coming in, or I'm going to give up. I have to do my dream, and then I'll never make the podium. Like, Kara, like, how did you think? I imagine that had to be part of your calculus.
Oh, totally. And that's one of the reasons why people always say, why don't track and field athletes unionize and fight for more? But I think it is because there's one pie, and you're just so desperate to get one little slice of it. And now I'm like, I have a slice, and I have like a slice and a half. I have a good slice right now. Like, I don't want to rock the boat. I can't tell you how many track and field athletes say, well, maybe when I'm done, I'll be willing to work for the next generation. And I get it, because you don't want to give up what you have. You earn that. You work so hard to have that. And everything is compounded. Like, that's how you make your living. But also that's how you get into races. If you can't get into races or track meets, then you're over anyway. So nobody wants to rock the boat or say anything. Everyone just wants to be good, be grateful for what you have. You're being given an opportunity. Don't mess it up.
So Kara, you make this decision that enough is enough, and you decide to take action. What, you were taking on these two powerful forces, which was your coach and a major company. And you were stepping up, and this is the courage part of the story. Like, what was that like? How did you, it sounds so intense from the outside. How did you work up the strength to do that? And what was the action that you took?
The first action was just leaving the Oregon project. That was the first action, just being able to say, I don't deserve to be treated like this. And, I remember when I left, my agent at the time was like, where are you going to go? Like, you're already at the best place, And it was like, I have to leave. If I have to stay here, then I'm going to quit running. Like, I can't do this. So that was like the first action, was just removing myself from that situation. And then a couple of years later, I went to the United States Anti-Doping Agency. A lot of that was my husband. He was so like, we need to do something. We need to say something. And again, like I said earlier, I was like, I don't want to rock the boat right now. I still have another Olympic Games in me. I don't want to do anything that jeopardizes that, but he was really supportive of like, you can make a difference. We can make a difference. And so going to USADA was the first step. And then eventually working with Safe Sport, although I never wanted to go to Safe Sport. This isn't like a slam on Safe Sport, but I never wanted to do anything with Safe Sport. But I think it was, once you make the decision, like, I'm going to do what's right, you just follow it. Even though it was awful, I got held out of races. I was, ripped apart online. Some like very famous writers would write about me who have never even met me and would talk about me. And so it was not good. But the thing is, once you decide, then you can't stop. Like, even when a day would be really bad, I'd be crying. I'd be like, I can't do this anymore. I'd wake up the next day and be like, I don't have a choice. I have to finish it now. Yeah.
When you burn down the house, and you burn down institutions, which is in a sense what you did for a very reasonable reason, not because you're an arsonist, but I have to think there's a lot of people who have set either they're oblivious or they're in positions of power, so they don't have to deal with that stuff, or they've said, I'm going to deal with this stuff. I'm like, why can't she put up with these? I have to do it too. But, and so I have to imagine, like, what was the reception that you got from people, and did it surprise you?
Yeah, I was surprised by it. I'm like a people pleaser. I'm like Minnesota nice. I grew up in Minnesota. So to be attacked online just so openly was shocking to me. It was really 50-50 at first because like half the people believed me and half the people were like, she's lying. She's just jealous. She's bitter. Why is she trying to take down one of the all-time greats and our greatest funding in our sport? Why is she trying to ruin it for everybody else? And then there were people that were like, oh my gosh, I wanted to say that. Thank you. But also in that 50% that supported me, not very many of them supported me publicly, right? It would be like a text message or if I saw them or a letter, but publicly they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to lose everything they had worked for. And I do understand that. I guess I just hadn't thought fully about the consequences. My husband and I went public in 2015 with what we saw there on the doping side, not the harassment or abuse side so much. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, I still am trying to make another Olympic team. I can't deal with this. And so he was like, well, I'll do it and I'll speak for us. And so he did. But then I started to feel like, well, that's stupid. Like people are going to ask me about this. So I just need to do it too. So I came back and they came back and I spoke to them as well. And I guess I knew there would be some backlash, but I hadn't really considered that there were big time races that wouldn't welcome me, that there were people who would never talk to me anymore, that appearance fees would go down. I hadn't considered all of that. And I think that really caught me off guard because I felt like I'm just telling the truth. Why am I being punished when I'm just telling the truth?
Yeah, I can imagine as a Mainer, a cold weather person too, who is a people pleaser, that is, you've done the right thing. And we always think that there's like the hero's journey and the person that does the right thing ends up with all the accolades, but there's a lot of costs. And that's why it's so hard for people to stand up and have courage. Mary, talk about the accountability in this story. Like what happened? Like what has been the impact?
Great question. Well, Kara's story, when I was working on this with her, it was kind of unique because a lot of it was still unfolding. We didn't know how the Safe Sport cases were going to end. And, that changes obviously the end of the book. And Nike spent millions of dollars going against Kara, period. End of sentence. So whatever marketing slogans, I actually get a lot of targeted ads now, ironically, about them backing women. That is not what happened in her case. Millions with a capital M. And so the accountability piece, I think, yes, Safe Sport, I think her case was probably the biggest test of Safe Sport, which is relatively new. So there was accountability there. But as Kara has pointed out, he could still coach at a high school. He could still privately coach, could very well be. We don't really know. What the enforcement mechanisms are there. It's a little unclear. Mary Kane, who was a runner who trained at the Oregon Project after Kara left, she has I believe it's a civil case pending. So, if you want to go the legal route and you want to get a lawyer and find one who either you can afford or will take your case on contingency, that's a path. But I think there's a long way to go. When the book came out, we both started getting really interesting messages from people about like, I'm not going to buy Nikes anymore. I'm not going to buy the apparel. I'm not going to, that brand means something different to me. And I think that's something I would remind everybody is like you as a consumer, you can vote with your dollars. And now there's a ton of, really interesting companies out there. It's not like they're the only shop in town for gear. So I think that that's something that, we, the people, are the board of directors in the United States, right? And like it or not, we live in a capitalist world. So people always have the option of, shopping differently, endorsing differently. And I think it's going to be interesting, and I'm curious what Kara's thoughts are, to see how and where athletes train going forward. I think one of the things that Kara had that has been really common in my experience is nobody wants this kind of attention. I mean, you're and we talked about this a lot in the book processes. I was like, you're going to have to go public about intimate things and relive some horrible, horrible stuff. But the common thread is everybody wants it to stop. Kara wanted it to stop. And I think this idea of people pleasing is really interesting. And I connect with a lot of that. But it's like, which people are you pleasing? right? And as time went on, it was clear that more people are going to be training at the Oregon Project, more people. And I think that from my conversations with Kara really shifted as a motivator of like, I'm willing to sacrifice a lot because there's this bigger thing. This actually isn't about me. This is about a sport I really care about, a culture I really care about. I was thinking that with the E. Jean Carroll news too. Like she wanted it to stop. You know, when you see up close what this process looks like for folks, it's so intense and it's so hard. And we live in a world, unfortunately, that makes it really, really hard. Hopefully it gets better. But yeah, and I think it's really inspirational, actually. I think it's really, we talk about resilience. I think it's really hopeful that there are people who are willing to go to hell and back to make things better.
FOMO. You just mentioned, the point you just made, Mary, about who are you pleasing? It's a really good one. I just want to hit it a little bit with an extra emphasis because you're the manipulators. If you're pleasing the manipulators, and by the way, folks who've listened to the show, we've been doing these episodes on sociopathic narcissists and malignant narcissists because they're all over the place and they're the people who do these things to us, right? And FOMO Sapiens were ambitious, so we get sucked in. So that's I just know that that's a thing that we all need to watch for. But if you're pleasing them, and yet the vast majority of people are feeling the same way as you are, it is interesting. They may not stand up. They may not have the courage, right? Because of all the things we've been talking about. But it's a really interesting way to reframe thinking about it. And by the way, speaking of Nike, you can go get some Brooks. We had Jim Weber on the show talking about his book, and I wear Brooks. And they're because I have a wide foot, but they're great. You don't have to get Nikes. Kara, I just want to end here with you, give you the last word here, which is, I'm sure we have people who are listening who are going through something right now, whether it's themselves, whether it's, somebody that they're close to, and they're asking themselves what to do. And there's no easy answers here, but, I want to give you the opportunity to just share, what your advice would be to somebody who is listening to this right now. They've got in the pit of their stomach. They're they know that they're in a situation like this.
My advice is to really think about what it's going to do to you to keep that a secret, right? To keep that in. And hopefully you have good people in your corner. I had my family and Adam, but I will just say that I got to a point where I thought, I actually have the power to say something and potentially protect someone else. And even though that's going to bring a lot, and it did bring a lot of, not good times my way, I felt like if I didn't say something, I was actually enabling the behavior. And I was actually allowing it to continue instead of doing something to change it for the next generation or the next woman or whoever. And so I really thought about that I was willing to sacrifice, or whatever you want to call it, my piece to make sure that I wasn't a part of the problem anymore. And so the other thing I would just say too is the more people that speak up when they see injustice, the harder it is to make those accusers seem crazy or the loner, right? The more people that say, no, I experienced that too, or I've also experienced that, it makes it harder for society to say, oh, they're just jealous, they're this, they're that. Because what are you going to do when there's 20 women talking or 20 men, whatever it is? It just takes on a different feel. So just really think about in your heart what it feels like to keep that a secret. And keeping it a secret is probably doing more damage to you than it is just telling it and being able to move forward.
All right. The book is called The Longest Race: Inside the Secret World of Abuse, Doping, and Deception on Nike's Elite Running Team. It is co-written by Kara Goucher and Mary Pilon. And you can find them both on Instagram. It's just at both of their names. Kara and Mary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com. FOMO. FOMO.